fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Hey Seahawk fans, welcome into another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, and I'm in a different location, so no background today, but we're reacting to the draft, Keith. We're here on Friday morning, first night of the draft, Thursday. Seahawks made their picks, stuck to their overall selections at 5 and 20, turned the picks in, and we're here to talk about it. Welcome in, man.
Yeah, no trades. I'm kind of surprised, especially the way the top 4 picks fell, with the Houston Texans jumping all over the place and doing Houston Texan things, and then Indy doing the unthinkable and drafting a massive project who won't be ready to play in year one for a team that doesn't have a quarterback at all. So they're going to make this guy that's not ready to play year one play in year one, which I thought was very unexpected.
You think?
Yeah. I fully expected them to take Levis in that spot simply because he could come in and play. And they don't have a quarterback, and they need someone who can play this year. Richardson's going to get everyone excited, but he's going to look like trash if they throw him out there this year. His mechanics are awful, and he's still got to learn the position. Athletically, he's amazing, and if they're probably going to set up and do some sort of like triple option, wing T type thing in order to get their offense moving and take advantage of his skills. But as far as running an NFL offense, he's not ready.
Yeah.
But you can't as for such as having such a high ceiling, I don't want to fault him with that. It's just unexpected to me that a GM would basically, because you used a 4th overall pick on a quarterback, and if he doesn't turn into the quarterback that you're telling everyone he's going to, you're not going to have a job or a career in the NFL. And that's just a huge risk. So we'll see how that rolls.
That's certainly an upside pick, Keith, if I've ever seen one. But, it is telling, too, at the same time, what GMs and the league thought about Will Levis. He fell out of a certain spot in the draft, and then he just kept going. Teams necessarily weren't looking for a quarterback where he was sliding, and we'll see what happens at the top end of the second round if somebody moves up a little bit, or he might be available.
Apparently it's medicals that's causing him to fall. According to Chris Mortensen from ESPN this morning, at least one team took him off the board. Their team that was in position to draft a quarterback and needs one took him off the board because of the left toe injury, like the toe injury that he had last year that made him miss a couple games. They think it's not healed and it's going to require surgery, and they're worried he was going to miss this year. Another team was saying that it was going to probably require surgery at least. Like if he makes it through the year, then he's going to have surgery next year. And so teams were being scared off by apparently something to do with ligaments and stuff in his toe. And so that's new. That's like something I hadn't heard. I didn't know there was any medical concerns with him. But Chris Mortensen is the most connected guy in the NFL, so I'm going to trust that.
So at the post first day draft press conferences, Pete Carroll and John Schneider sat down with the media, and they talked about what happened with the picks. And so at 5, it sounded like Seattle, according to John Schneider, had 2 players that they would stick with the pick on, and Witherspoon would be one of those. And I can only speculate that it may have been Richardson or Anderson at 5, and they would have also made that pick and turned the card in. But let's talk about what they did. So they're sitting there at 5. The board fell in a way that was not unexpected, even if the teams flipped around a little bit at the top. The players that we were hoping may be available to Seattle at 5 were no longer there. We were left with Will Levis, Jalen Carter, Tyree Wilson, and Witherspoon as the players available on the
Mhm.
board. Obviously, they took Carter off their board. He was not an option for them. Will Levis was graded much lower, apparently. And then it just came down to Wilson for me, Wilson and Witherspoon, and they went and just got their player, Keith. We
Well,
talked a little bit about Witherspoon in the draft. We
yeah.
talked about the overarching idea that corner would be a position that I personally said they might upgrade. That don't necessarily need a corner, but possibly the upgrade, and that's exactly what they did.
Out of all the positions on the field, corner was the least needing an upgrade on the roster. Um, every other position could have used an upgrade more than corner. And the fact that they'd never taken a corner, um, before the late '90s in terms of draft position, the idea that they would take one at 5 was unfathomable. Um, but they think this kid's special, and they used the number 5 overall pick, on it. I like the idea, if you think a guy's special, taking him. Um, I didn't study him, as closely as I normally would because, again, I was the Seahawks aren't taking a corner, I don't need to know him that well. But I went back yesterday and did a bunch of looking and watching tape after that. This kid's gonna be great. I'm not concerned about that at all. He's Everyone's like, "Oh, he's not, very long." Well, yeah, he's 5'11" instead of, like 6 or 6'1". I don't care about that. Um, the key is that he's super aggressive. He's incredibly just feisty in terms of the way that he tackles, um, and he just doesn't make mistakes. He didn't give up a touchdown this last year, and that's not a great defense that he was on. It's not like he had a great front seven, getting pressure. He had to cover forever and still didn't give up a touchdown all year. He only gave up 3 yards per passing attempt, to player when they threw it towards him. Um, Statistically, he's great. The tape looks great. I love the player. I don't like the pick, but I love the player. But I'm sure we can get into that in a second.
I love the pick, and I love the player. I mean, to me, the Seahawks nailed it, knocked it out of the park in this, considering the situation. And they come away upgrading the position. I thought that they could have done that. I like Mike Jackson as a corner, but when you pair him with Woolen, it was an average secondary last year. And I think this is a special player, Keith. It really is. I mean, I took a look at Witherspoon peripherally in this draft, just as part of the exercise overall, because he's up there. But I didn't expect them to make this pick at all, just as you said. But once they made the pick, you really take a look at it. It makes a ton of sense the way that Pete Carroll talked about him. He compared him to Polamalu as far as a player he used to coach. That same sort of mentality, just to go get it, instincts on jumping routes and making plays on the ball. One of the most physical players in this draft, and just a playmaker for that defense. It's going to create a situation where teams are going to have issues throwing the ball on the Seahawks. And I love the pick. I realize it's not the most coveted position of need in this draft, not even close. But it's a long draft process. We've got 3 picks in day 2. And I think that they've got some time here to still put this thing together as a draft is looked at as a whole. We're still early in this process. So for me, they were going to take a corner in this draft, Keith. We've talked about
Oh,
Julius Brents quite often, and other
yep.
corners in the second and third round, and they went ahead and just did that early and knocked it out. Got the
Here's
best
here's
corner
the
in the draft, Keith.
here's the problem that I have with it. Yes, he's the best quarter of the draft. Truly a special player. I'm not saying he's not. I love the player. But they could have traded back 3 times, 4 times. They could have not picked yet and still got a very, very good corner, an elite corner in Joey Porter Jr. And I'm asked a whole bunch of other players. The cost difference of the number 5 overall pick versus an early second rounder. is not,
Keith, you could
um,
make that argument at almost any position.
it's not enough. This isn't enough of an upgrade. You can Jalen Carter has all the, off-field baggage. If he didn't, he'd probably be the number 1 overall pick, but the difference between him and the 2nd defensive tackle is massive.
I would argue too that taking, let's just say it was Jalen Carter instead of Devon Witherspoon. Let's say Jalen Carter didn't have any issues; he was going to come in and be a good player. The impact on the defense, I would argue, is almost the same. Devon Witherspoon's going to break up, 20 passes in a game, have 4 or 5 interceptions, going to be day one starter. His impact is going to be tangible. Jalen Carter's impact at that position, he might have 25 tackles on the year, uh, 10 pressures, and 3 sacks if he's lucky. And that's the reality of defensive tackle at the nose tackle position, or 3 tech in a 3-4 in his first year. I'm just saying, I think that the immediate impact for this pick is where the value lies. And I think that, yes, you could argue Brents or Cam Johnson or Kaylee Ringo or a few other corners that you're taking, in the first 50 to 75 picks has got similar value. I would argue this player is just special, just another notch above that. I'm talking like Earl Thomas level impact on your defense. That's what
Well,
this player is.
and I get that, and like I said, I love the player. No, I do not doubt the quality of the guy in any way. It's just a matter of the opportunity cost. It's not a huge difference between him, Gonzalez, and Joey Porter Jr. in my opinion. Those 3 guys are all elite corners, which makes what Washington did really funny, but that's a topic for later. Um, but those 3 guys are all elite corners. Witherspoon's the best of the 3, but we're talking about a round early.
I
In
would
order
still argue that,
to get him over Porter, it's a round earlier. That's a huge opportunity cost, for
I,
a
I
slightly better player.
I would argue that, the positional value equation of this is important. And corner is one of those positions that you can grab a top 10 talent and people aren't questioning the value like they would running back or other positions, safety, etc. Corner has definitely an impact on your roster. And I think this is going to tangibly make the roster better. And in the end, when it's all said and done, a year from now, when we can evaluate his season and paired with Woolen and how the defense played overall, where the holes are, where the holes remain, etc. It's just a matter of the way the board fell. This was kind of the worst case scenario, if you will, for the Seahawks at pick 5, not being able to trade back or not.
They were able to
It
trade
sounded, it,
back.
it sounded like they had a few things going.
They had multiple trade offers according to,
They did, but they looked
one
at the
report,
value
and they said
proposition for that. They said no. They said this is the player that we intend to come out of the draft with. And you have to, having them gone through this process and really, I mean, sinking into it. And this is the player that they chose to stay with at 5. I'm okay with it. I think that's why I think this is a great pick for the Seahawks. Now, whether you're right or I'm right or wrong or whatever, I think in the end is probably mute. The idea that they upgraded their roster, got better at a position, took the best player at a position in the draft, I think is a win for them. And down the road, we'll be able to see if that proves to be true or not.
well, and then they came out in, with their 2nd pick, the 20th pick, and picked a guy that you love, at wide receiver. I'm, uh, absolutely sold on everything he does. Like, talk about an instant upgrade at a position. They needed a 3rd wide receiver. They went and got a 2nd wide receiver. Now,
Right.
who's the 3rd between DK Tyler and, Smith Najigba? Is that Najigba? Is that right?
Jaxon-Smith and the Jigba. Yeah.
Yep. Who's number 3 out of that group's going to, be up for debate, and I bet even amongst the coaches. But I mean, that's a fantastic player. Um, but again, like, they could have got a 3rd wide receiver later. This team has massive flaws. the way
You
this
could
roster is constructed.
you could say this, you could make this argument darn near in any position because Seattle is light on at least 5 position groups.
Yeah, but
And
wide receiver and cornerback are ones where they were set. I mean, they needed a third wide receiver, but their top
yeah.
2, they've already got their Pro Bowl guys.
Yes, but, Tyler Lockett's entering his year 31, season. He's under contract for 1 more season, and, um, you have to start thinking about the future in that respect. In the second respect, as you know, Seattle has not had a consistent 3rd, receiver presence on this team for 3 or 4 years at least.
Yeah, I know.
And we were going to take this is the same argument I made for the cornerback thing. We were going to take a wide receiver in this draft. The question is when is the opportunity available to you, and when do you pull the trigger on that? And the way that the board fell, and you've got 31 other teams in this thing, and they're jockeying and making decisions that impact your position in the draft. And at 20, if you take a look at the big board, he was there. Now, from what I understand, they were trying to do something late. They went all the way down to the wire with the pick on the clock, and they were trying to make a couple of things happen. It didn't sound like it came together. Now, that's according to John Schneider, and they don't want to embarrass Najigba and tell him that he wasn't going to be the pick, and they were forced to make it. But that's kind of what it sounded like. So I'll give you that they were trying to move off this thing, gain some additional value in probably day 2, and just weren't able to put that deal together. And they went and had to make the pick, and they picked the best player that they thought was going to have the biggest impact on their roster. And I thought
They
that's why I don't mind this pick so
they
much.
they in both of these cases, they picked the best player available, the best player on their board. And in both of these cases, they didn't make the team significantly better.
I disagree with that.
Because it doesn't matter how good your cornerbacks are if you don't have a defensive line.
That
And they
is true.
don't have a defensive line. And it doesn't matter how good your receivers are if you can't block up the middle or run the football.
We certainly
And
have
they
a
can't
trench problem on this team, Keith. There's no doubt about it.
you
But
can't
we also
and
have
you
day
have to
2 and day
start in
3
the
of the
middle.
draft. What I'm going to say here is that no matter who we would have picked in the trenches, Cansey went a pick ahead of 20. He may have been the guy. If we pick Jalen Carter at 5, if we pick Keanu Benton in the second round, first pick overall, or it's John Michael Schmitz, or it's Tipton, or it's somebody else, yada yada. The impact that those players are going to have on this defense overall is going to be marginal anyway. Now, Tipton can come in and start. Schmitz could come in and start at center, but it's center. I think we can address that and get a starting center out of this. We still have 3 picks in the next tonight. I just don't know that they would have the same impact though that these players have. But you're right. We need to be able to block and tackle up front. We do. Our,
And we
our
can't.
trenches are a mess,
Yeah.
Keith.
So
It's
they've got
absolutely a fact. But the
so
draft
they've
didn't
got
fall that
great
way.
corners. They've got great corners
Who
and
would you have picked at
average
20? Would you
safeties.
have reached up and grabbed Mozzie Smith? And would Mozzie Smith be a better pick than Najigba long term for this roster? Or just in the
It's
short window of we need a guy today, so we're going to go get the inferior player on our board because
you
of
think
need.
Mozzie Smith
That's the debate,
isn't
really.
in Mozzie Smith isn't inferior to anyone as a nose tackle. He's the best nose tackle to come out of this draft in quite a while
Is
because
nose is nose
his
tackle
si-
more valuable than the best wide receiver in the draft on their board?
the best nose tackle in the draft versus the best receiver in the draft when you've got receivers and you don't have any defensive linemen on your roster.
So you're prioritizing drafting for need as opposed to drafting best player available. And
I'm
that's really the
saying
argument, isn't
the
it?
difference in value between Najigma and Mozzie Smith is minimal. They probably have identical grades. Maybe like
Ish. Yeah, I would argue.
yeah, I
I would
mean,
say yes, within
if
a
they have
margin of 5% ish,
yeah,
give or take. Yeah.
if they have identical grades, then why are you not fixing your own? You don't have the cap room to go get a guy. So they're basically admitting they're going to go into the season with
That
like
it tells
2.
me that on their board, they didn't equate the 2 players. They did not have him graded at the same. That's the only
Now
reason that
see
it
it.
would make sense to make this pick for the Seattle if Najigba was in fact the highest by a margin, a wide margin. And, most draft boards had projected him to go anywhere between 12 and, 17, maybe 20 if he fell a little bit. And he did. Um, because last year he had the hamstring. He played a total of 17 snaps or something like that. The year before he had 1,600 yards and 375 yards in the Rose Bowl, was the MVP and a top 5 pick in the draft if he would have gone out. He was a sophomore there, so he came back for his junior year. It didn't work out, but nonetheless, this guy's a huge talent, and he did that 1,600 and something yards and a bunch of touchdowns with Olave and Garrett Wilson on the roster. So, I mean, this guy's not a slouch at wide receiver.
No one's saying that he is. I'm just saying, like, as far as impact on the roster, as far as making your team better and being able to compete, wide receiver and cornerback were not the positions that made this roster better. They are.
And that's where it gets sticky, because then you're drafting for need over drafting for best player available. And
if you were a 9-win team coming into the draft after giving 2 first-round picks, you are exactly a 9-win team right now. You didn't make your team better with 2 first-round picks. That's the problem I have. It's not the guys. The guys are great. These are the best corner in the draft, the best receiver in the draft, in my opinion.
You just turned your position groups on the team, though, from good, solid cornerback room, wide receiver room, okay. I mean, probably less than solid. You've got it great at the top, but our third wide receiver back was not solidified on this roster by any means. You took 2 position groups on the team that were okay, solid as a cornerback room, and you turned them into elite. And so I would argue that, yes, in fact, you did make your team better. You solidified it to the point where it's elite, and you're going to go in and beat teams because of it, I believe. I think that Witherspoon's that good. I think he's going to be a turnover machine, ball hawk, that pairing there back on the back end, especially with Julian Love coming in and Diggs.
They can't cover forever.
True, but it does make it easier for it does make it gives the front end a little bit more time to get to the quarterback.
They're going to need
anyway. What I'm saying is that I like the picks. I'm not going to discount it in that way. I want to see this thing play out. Obviously, the draft is a big process. We've only gone through the first round. Last year, Seattle was successful in adding 6 starters to its team through round 5, and with that Woolen pick. And I'm saying we've got a process here that we need to execute, and let's evaluate where we're at as a whole, not just these 2 picks in a small sample size, if you will. And I think that when you take a look back after it's all said and done, we're not necessarily looking at Cross, and we're looking at Abe Lucas and where they were picked in the draft and if they were good values or not. We took a look at that whole draft, and we said, we got 6 starters out of the draft, and it's an impact, and we don't care really where they were drafted. How did they affect the roster? And I think that's what we need to do here, is just step back a little bit and allow the process to work.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I look at this and if you were to look at the difference between, if instead of getting Witherspoon at corner, you got Julius Brents. Julius Brents is not as good a player. He's still a good player, very good player, would be an instant starter. The difference there compared to the difference between Skoronski, the best guard in this draft, and Luke Weipler, who someone like that they'll probably end up with. The difference there is bigger, and it has a bigger impact on your ability to win games because of what you have around them.
I kind of agree with you. I agree
build your
with
roster in a way that allows you to win games. And
inside out, I agree.
If you don't have anything in the trenches, all the cornerbacks and wide receivers in the world aren't going to help you win games. Now, they need help in the trenches badly.
Last year, Seattle successfully kind of remade its draft philosophy, in that they kind of went after Cross. Cross was kind of a need, but also best player available at 9. But after that, they kind of allowed the draft to kind of come to them. They did go out and get Mafe. They got Ken Walker, Abe Lucas, Kobe Bryant and Woolen, and they just kind of let the draft come to them. Best player available at the time, blah, 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 blah. And so I think they really wanted to come into this draft using that same philosophy in general. Best player available, not pressing for need, et cetera. They've done the need thing in the past. It hasn't really worked for them. It was horrendous when they did Collier and so forth. There's other draft picks as well where that happened. I really like the philosophical approach, even if it means that the largest priority needs weren't addressed in the first round. There's only 2 picks in the first round. This isn't like just because we missed out on Carter, we missed out on Mozzie Smith or other players that we thought would be better fits because they also fit positional needs. I think that the draft is deeper than that, and I think there's an opportunity still here for the Seahawks to come out of the draft with potentially 3 more impact players, 3 more starter level kind of players in this draft. And if we also go to positions of need, and we both agree that trenches on both sides of the football are what we need, how will you feel after day 2?
I will feel that they got inferior players than what they could have got, and that they
But that's
drafted
only based on draft need, though, or
they
draft
no.
grades, not
Well,
necessarily
what they
inferior, though.
did was they drafted sexy picks instead of what wins you football games. And what wins you football games is offense and defensive line. That's what wins you football games. Cornerbacks and wide receivers are sexy. They sell tickets. They get people excited. But it's the offense and defensive line more than anything that wins football games. That's what I'm going to come away feeling. If they come out now and they get you know, Benton and Schmitz here in the second round, and I
I
don't know,
just
Siaki Ika in the third, they will have filled all of their positions of need. But the truth is that those 3 guys, well, Schmitz is the best center in the draft, but the other 2 guys are good, but not elite
I'm gonna
at
I'm
what they
gonna
do.
I'm gonna stop you just for a second. So when we've done all of our mocks, and we've talked about this endlessly, and we've gone through this process with every position group deep, I mean, like 10, 15 players deep at every spot. And we've gone through draft boards, and we've gone through the mocks, and often in the first round, we've chosen a quarterback. We've chosen, Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud if he fell or whatever. That's one of the first round picks that we
Mhm.
did. And maybe that 20th pick we might have used on a edge rusher or a defensive tackle or possibly Schmitz or whatever. That's the other. So you're saying based on just maybe possibly one pick difference based on all the mocks we did, and quite often we would mock Schmitz at 37, or if it was Tippmann, or it's Benton, or Ika, or
Mhm.
Mozzie Smith at 37, and so forth. So we did all those mocks, and we mocked all those guys that are trench guys in the second and third round, and we didn't have any problem with those mocks, and we
We
kind of
also
praised those
mocked
mocks.
all the trench guys in the first round too.
Often we did, but sometimes it didn't
There were
work
a
out that
lot
way.
of Jalen Carters, a lot of Brian Breeses, a lot of Mozzie Smiths. G-
Yeah,
Good, very. I mean,
yeah,
trench
yes.
guys. Um,
But only one usually. I mean, the other guy was sometimes a quarterback, and you'd mentioned yourself that the value idea of the 5th pick overall, you want to go get your quarterback. I mean, so if they made the quarterback selection and they only had one other pick that was a trench guy in the first round, that would only be one player difference
yeah,
in where we're at currently right now in
and they'd be
beginning of
and
day
they
2.
and they'd be a better team in 2023 and a better team in the future, considering they would have the quarterback long term, and they would actually be able to stop the run or run the football, which are 2 things they can't do right now. And they also don't have a quarterback in the future. Um,
Right. And they don't have a running back, a second running back. So they
yeah,
might
I
have
mean,
to spend what how pissed would you be if they took that 37th pick overall and drafted Charbonnet? Um,
it's a waste of a
right?
pick.
right?
It's a
So, but
completely you want
earlier,
just take your picks and throw them in the trash.
but if you drafted a trench guy and an offensive lineman in the the first round, Charbonnet doesn't feel so bad.
You're right, it
So,
doesn't because
right.
now you can actually take advantage of a player's skill set. The way the roster is constructed, drafting Charbonnet is a waste of a pick. He'll never see the field because you're only going to run the ball 10, 12 times a game because you won't have any blocking up front for a running game. Um, and all of those carries are going to Ken Walker
I think
because
that's
there's only like
dramatic,
10 of them.
Keith. I think that's a little dramatic, but because we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I just don't know that you take the premier guys off the board now at one. There's still really good, solid players that can come in and start for you uh, in the NFL in rounds 2 and 3. It happens every year. It happened last year. I
Yeah, but the difference is you're getting the solid players at the positions that help you win games,
Abe
and you're
Lucas
getting
last year
the
in the third round almost made the Pro Bowl. I mean, these things can happen. I'm not saying that the trend is percentage wise that it's greater than the first round. True, but it's
if you're
still
gonna
open to the Seahawks, and
it it
we
would
proved that over and over again when
it
we did
comes
all of
down to
our
roster
mocks.
it comes down to roster building philosophy. Your highest investments in positions should be in the positions that matter most to winning football games. Quarterback, defensive line, offensive line, kind of in that order.
So you
Um,
think that Seattle approached the first round in their first picks as luxury picks almost?
they did. They absolutely did.
And I looked at them more as premium picks, like
No, they're
turning
luxury
out
picks.
into elite position groups on our team. And I think that helps wins games as well. But they do need to address those trenches. There's no doubt they don't have a defensive tackle on the roster. They have three
Yeah.
defensive linemen in overall, if you don't
Mhm.
count the outside edge rushers.
Which we don't
Um,
because they play a 3-4. Those are linebackers.
and so
Um,
and then on the inside, we've got Evan Brown at center, and we've got Haynes, who's sometimes injured, as our
sometimes.
only legitimate starting guard on the roster.
Mhm.
So I totally agree. I hear what you're saying.
It
I
comes
just
down
don't
it's not the
necessarily mind
players.
these picks at the top.
It's not the player that I have a problem with because there was the 2 guys the Seahawks drafted are freaking amazing. It is a roster building philosophy. You win by investing the most resources in quarterback, defensive line, and offensive line. Always start there and work your way out. Cornerback and wide receiver are way down on that list. They have this great opportunity, all these resources, both in free agency and in now the draft, and they're not investing their resources in the things that win you football games.
Well, they spent the most money they've ever spent on a free agent in free agency to add to their defensive tackle room in Dre Jones. Um,
Yeah,
and
and
they brought back Deron Reed as well. So I
in
mean,
order to
they
sign
did.
those guys, they literally cut their entire defensive line room.
Right, but they yeah, but they also brought back brought in Evan Brown too. So the three positions they spent the most money on in free agency, Keith, they spent in the trenches. So, the, but they need to do more. There's no question they need to do more, and I think in day two you'll see that in the draft. Let's talk about day two, like what they do. Okay, so let's set aside what they did with the fifth and 20th pick. We'll have plenty of time to discuss that further down the road. Let's preview kind of what's going to happen in day two. They've got pick 37, they've got pick 52, and they've got pick 83. And John Schneider today or last night in the press conference said that while those picks are the picks they have currently, they'd like to be able to possibly move around a little bit and either identify their players and go get them or move back off those picks and pick up additional value. So, what would you like to see them do today?
They have got to invest in the things that win football games. They need to go out and draft um, John Michael Schmitz if he's available at 37. They can't wait. You don't get cute and drop. And if it's not him, then it better be defensive tackle.
or
Or what?
Joe Tipman.
Well, yeah, you do. If Titman's like your fallback, if you don't get, if you
Personally,
decide,
I like Tipman better, but yeah, right. One of those guys at center, absolutely. Or a guard. I think guard, if you pick a guard, maybe Evan Brown goes into the season as your center, but at least you got your guard handled. One of those two, for sure.
you've got to go get um, you got to Osiris Torrance at guard. We'll go with that. I think you've got to at 37, you've got to get a trench guy, either one of those three offensive linemen or a defensive lineman. And if you do anything else, honestly, you're not setting yourself up to win. I think when you look at at the defensive lineman, we're talking about Siaka Ika, the 340-pound nose tackle out of Baylor, Zach Pickens, who's a smaller guy, and Keanu Benton. Those are kind of the guys that you're looking at. Maybe Cameron Young, um,
He's a little
in
later,
terms of
but yeah.
As far as like 37. And then if you're looking at the second pick in the second round, Ade, who you've mentioned, Byron Young, and that's also where Cameron Young kind of comes into play.
Yeah.
Those they have Gerard Clark later in the draft, maybe
Yeah.
around 3, or they've got to go out and do this, because if you don't invest in those positions, then you have to figure out who's going to play there during the season. And right now, they're set to have most of their defensive line rotation be made up of undrafted rookie free agents, because they don't have the bodies now and they don't have the cap room to go get a veteran.
Yeah. They have put themselves into a corner, Keith.
They
There's no
have.
doubt. They haven't done what they needed to do in free agency, and they spent the money on Jaxon-Smith and other places. And I mean, they did elect to bring in Dre Jones, Keith. And, that's a big solve for them. But it also, you mentioned it earlier, they jettisoned a whole bunch of other guys that were, and they
Hmm.
haven't brought back Al Woods. They haven't brought back Poona Ford. Those guys still might be in play. But again, we're talking about a money situation now for the Seahawks. So they've pressed themselves into a situation where they need to draft for need. Hopefully it aligns um, with their board and with the value of those picks as well. But they would be much better if they came out of the draft with Keanu Benton, the defensive tackle out of Wisconsin.
Mm.
He could play a couple different spots for them. He could play out at the 5. He could come in at the 3 for sure. He could play nose tackle for you. Ade obviously is another guy that could play 3, but they've already got 2 other 3 techs on the roster. They need a nose tackle is what they need. So I'd be
Yep.
looking at guys like Zach Pickens. Obviously you'd mentioned that before. Byron Young,
Siaki Ika.
Ika, and Cameron Young out of Mississippi State. It's another guy. He's currently
Pickens isn't a nose tackle. He's only 294.
right. He'd be your another 3 tech, 5 tech kind of guy. Yeah.
So but the thing is, if you draft a guy like Pickens, you draft him to be your 3 tech, or your 5 tech, Jones being the other one, and then you just move Reed inside. Reed spent like the first 3 years of his career as a nose tackle. He can do
Yeah.
that job.
Or you can get like a guy like Jared Clark, in the 6th, 7th round, and a guy that's 335 pounds, and he comes in and just
Mhm.
plays on some rundowns. You are depending on young talent, with this philosophy, and I don't know if that's the greatest thing to do.
Well, you
You and
have
I
to.
have complete agreement, Keith, is
You
that
have to you have to depend on young talent, because you don't have the roster to go, well, if the young talent works out, great, but if it doesn't, we'll just figure it out
yeah,
next
and
year.
at the hit rate, in the first round and the second round is about equal.
Hmm.
So I still think that they can have some success here. There was no guarantees with Jalen Carter being the player that could solve all Seattle's problems. There's no guarantee that Mozzie Smith is going to be that. There's some holes in his game as well. Um, I need to trust the process a little bit, and I'm going to check in after rounds 2 and 3. You and I are going to watch this draft together today.
Yep.
So that'll be fascinating to sit in the same room together and have this discussion. But I would definitely want them to come away with at least two defensive players in this out of the next
Out of
three.
these 3.
Yeah, and I
Agreed.
don't know. I mean, one of them could totally disappoint me. It could be linebacker Drew Sanders or something. We'd like Drew Sanders as a prospect, but at this point, it's if Drew Sanders and Keanu Benton's on the board and they're roughly in the same ballpark as far as grade, and they don't pick Benton, I would lose. I would start to lose my stuff as well.
Yeah. I mean,
You and I are the same in the same. We see this the same way. I just don't. I think that Seattle took advantage of where they were at and the way that the board fell and the fact they didn't decide to trade and so forth. And they got some really good players. I think long term, I'm going to be happy with those. So I'm not going to trash the first round picks. I love the players, just like you. The process, though, you and I are closer in agreement to the process argument on this whole thing
Mhm.
than this. It's kind of come out here. I was kind of arguing in favor of the picks and the team, but I agree with the process part of this in that we have major holes on our defense and offensive lines that aren't being addressed, and
Mhm.
it's a wonder right now sitting here before day two how they're going to solve that heading into the season without money and without players. So hopefully that all comes together. I don't know how, but
I
it
mean
will.
I like Drew Sanders. I think that's a great player, and it would be a position of need because they need another inside linebacker. They need to get Bush out of the starting lineup, because I don't think you can count on him. But again, okay, that's a great improvement to the roster, but you still don't have a defensive line. You still don't have the most important part of your defense.
Yeah. And
And
we
you're
just and
still
we talked today, what if they pick Charbonnet? Well, Charbonnet is a great running back and he'd be a great number 2 running back to pair with um what we've got.
yeah,
But
pair with Walker.
wow, I mean you're going to have to spend that 37 overall pick to get him. And if they did that, I would my jaw would drop if they chose another offensive player in this draft when you have so many other needs, at
Yeah.
center and guard and defensive tackle. The list goes on.
How
Um,
good are you gonna be if 3 of the 7, um, members of your defensive line rotation are rookies drafted in either on day 3 or undrafted rookie free agents? How good is
yeah.
your team? How good is your defense?
Well,
You're
something's
not
going to have to break. There's going to
you're
have to be
certainly
some
not.
restructure of contracts, and I do believe that guys like Puna Ford and Al Woods are on speed dial right now because of what's happened here.
Mhm.
That's kind of where we're at. We're basically to the point where they're going to have to find $6 or $7 million here in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and also hope for training camp cuts to be able to pick up a couple players because that's kind of where they're at. And I they did the same thing last year with the linebacker group, and they did the same thing at center. We thought that they were counting on Blythe to come in and be a guy, and it just didn't work. And that was a
Mhm.
fault of free agency. They did the same thing with edge rushers the year prior and the year prior to that. They did, now it's defensive tackle where you've got this major hole heading into the draft, and then you don't attack it in the draft. And now after the draft, you're left still with the same problem you had on February 1st. So that I have a problem with for sure.
At some point, you have to invest resources in the right places, and this team has 40 million in cap space spent on safety. Half of that on a guy that's played, uh, like 15 snaps in the last 18 months.
Yeah, I mean that seems like the logical place to find some money, but again,
What
they've come
what
out over and over and over again in the last 3 or 4 weeks and reiterated their support for Jamal Adams on this roster this year and how much of an impact he's going to have on this
Sure.
season if
I
healthy, quote
Yeah,
unquote.
they're coming out and doing that because they're being rightfully criticized for, cutting a guy that played really well and was only gonna cost them, 2.5 million in order to keep a guy that didn't play at all and cost 18. So they're coming out in support of Adams in an effort to answer the criticism, which they're getting, and it's deserved. You can't
Well,
spend that much of your
it
cap
was
space
a
on
problem before
safety.
Love came to the team.
I'm not talking about Love, I'm
Oh,
talking
I
about
know.
Adams and,
Ryan Neal, I know.
Ryan Neal.
I know that, but spending at safety was already an issue with Diggs and Adams, and then
That's
they
what I
brought in
mean.
Love in free agency.
They needed moving on from Adams and reallocating the resources away from a low value position into some place that actually can help you, win,
Right.
where you need to be allocating your resources would make this team better. They Snyder and, Carroll deserve criticism for the way that they've handled safety and defensive line. Um,
And offensively. I mean,
oh,
it helped last year hitting on 2 tackles, but the rest of the line needs a little bit of help too.
yeah,
Agreed. I know. It's crazy. Hey, I'm gonna see you later today. I'm in the
yep.
Northwest. Keith's coming over. We're watching the draft together, so that'll be great. We may record tonight. May do a live show. May just sit back and watch the draft. Don't know yet for sure. But
Depends
we'll have
on
some
how many adult beverages we've had by the time the Seahawks make their last pick.
Hey, let's record.
Or, maybe we shouldn't record because having the 2 of us, not be able to complete a sentence and a train of thought doesn't make for a great show, so that's a possibility as well.
I'm anticipating a great day 2 of the draft.
I'm
This
expecting
is
it
the
to be
bread and
fun either way.
this is the bread and butter part of the draft where I think John Schneider and Pete Carroll do a great job. I think that we're going to get value. Hopefully, maybe we can pick up an extra pick. It looks like if you drop down 10 spots in from 37 to 47, you might be able to pick up a late third round pick. That's kind of where the value is. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily agree that we should be dropping back from 37. I think that there's really good players. Now, maybe if we get the really good player at 37, we feel more comfortable dropping back from 52. That
Mhm.
I could understand a little bit, but then you're only really getting a fourth round pick at that point, maybe even a fifth to drop back. And so I'm not exactly sure what the philosophy is going to be heading into today. I'd rather just stick and make the picks, um, just because I think we've got a real good opportunity here to improve the roster, improve the team, and it's hard when you've gone through this process for a long time to get stuck at 37 in your head and know that there's going to be certain players available, and when if they don't, it's not going to be good. I still think they end up with some really good players today. That's going to
And this is
really
what you're
help the
saying is
team.
part of the issue at 5 is if they had moved back from 5, they could have moved back from 5 to 7 and picked up another late second or
Yeah,
mid-second.
yeah. But the
Um,
player they really wanted wasn't going to be available. Detroit was hanging there at
I
6
know.
and
They
was
had
going to make
they
that
had to
pick.
pick before Detroit if they wanted Witherspoon, I get that. I'm just saying, you can get a lot of draft capital by moving down,
Right.
um,
And
in the
they had
early
another
to mid
opportunity
round
at 20
1.
to do it as well.
Yep, and, yeah, you can get a lot of draft capital moving down in the 1st round. It's hard to generate draft capital now. So I'm with you. Stick where you're at. Take your picks.
They may
Um,
end up spending future picks too because of the need. They need to fill out this roster. They've got prior to the draft that we talked about this, they've got 52, 53 players under contract. They're going to go into training camp with 90 players on the roster. That means about 40 players are going to be rookies out of this class plus undrafted rookie free agents.
yeah,
And they've got an okay roster, but obviously they have a long ways to go, and we saw that with the game against the third game of the year in the playoffs against the 49ers, how far away we were from
yeah,
contending, really contending.
yep, and this is gonna be an extremely young team. They're gonna have the starters to look like they're gonna be able to compete on paper, but the NFL, being a true contender, you have to have depth, and this team is not gonna have depth yet. This is still a rebuilding situation. Even if they went to the playoffs in the first
Yeah.
the first year of the rebuild, it's still a rebuilding situation. The roster isn't where it needs to be, but it's not going to be. Like they spent last year tearing it down, and now they're starting to build it up. And they were a playoff team because they hit on 6 different draft picks, which is crazy. And this year so far, I know that we've got 2 really good players as long as they stay healthy. That part's nice. It's just you can't field a team without defensive linemen.
That is very true. And we'll see what
So,
happens. We'll see what happens.
mhm,
It's a long way to September 1st. By then the roster will be set. And every year, and I've been doing this a long, and so have you, been doing this a long time. By September 1st, we will have a complete roster. We will have enough players on defense to field a team, including the defensive line, and they'll be good players. They're not going to go in with a bunch of undrafted rookie free agents in the rotation. Maybe one, if one really stands out, but they're going to solve this going in. They're going to create cap space. They're going to go out and get the guys they need to get in order to feel comfortable going into the season. But optimally, they get some really good talent out of this draft that can come in on the team and affect the team this year and really solidify it in the years to come. And I agree, they need to invest. So we'll see what happens. All right, let's get out of here. Enough chatter for today. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. Even though the screen is opposite down below our names. And
yep. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm over there, right? Yeah, over there.
Exactly. And you can find me on Twitter at Northwest Seahawk. You can find the show at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. SeahawksPlaybook.com is the website. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube, and hit the subscribe button when you get there. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.